Well, let's talk about that fight and where it ought to go from here, and let's bring in our panel for that. We're joined by, of course, Dominic Carter, political journalist and author, Andrew Whitman, senior political correspondent, and Richard St. Paul, Republican strategist and former vice chair for the National Black Republican Association. And Richard, I want to talk about a hat you wore earlier, veteran yourself here, you're in the military. I mean, I've been covering this in 15 years ago when there was problems with the VA facilities where guys were waiting too long to get care and that the mortality rates were higher than they needed to be because of whatever. And since then, we've had 2 wars. Why is this thing so hard to fix?
Well, it's a broken system. My father was a veteran. My 2 cousins are veterans. It's a broken system, and it's a bureaucracy, and it requires a lot of management, and it requires a lot of attention. You know, the president spoke about reforming the VA when he came into office. It's not something that you can just put one person in charge of. It's something that and then let it stand. You've got to continuously be on top of it, and we see as a result of the mismanagement that has taken place up top and not staying on top of this issue, what has happened. Now, I couldn't wait for this question, though. This is not unlike the Obama administration. We've seen the same mismanagement and with the Secretary of Human...
Will you agree with me on this one, though?
Secretary of Human...
I'll let you answer it. They've gone back.
Health and Human Services.
Certainly happened under the Bush years during, for 8 years, we're talking about Afghanistan and Iraq. God knows the guys who came back, what they've run into in older vets. This isn't a partisan issue. I agree with you. Buck stops at the top. This commander-in-chief said he was going to fix this 2.5 years ago, right? He put a new guy in there and everything else. I grant you, I'm not giving a pass to this president, but Republican or Democrat who's ever sit in the Oval Office, they can't get this thing right.
Well, again, like I said, the Secretary of Health and Human Services, the IRS, heads in the IRS, I mean, there's been a lot of mismanagement under the Obama administration. There's no surprise that the Veterans Administration was mismanaged. Who knows what agency will be mismanaged next? All right. I think it's the style of the president, not to be a manager.
I call BS on that.
He's not a good manager.
Not only because this stuff was wrong, and that's why the president had to remove the last VA secretary that inherited it, and that he said we're going to change this around. So it's not like the system was working and he screwed it up. It's been broken. But Andrew, here's the point.
He knew what the problem was and didn't fix it.
We looked at funding before tonight's show, where it was and where it is now. They've actually put more money into the system. Even over the objections, with all due respect, here's some Republicans who said, time out, we've got to make this pay go. They still find a way to put more money into the thing. Is it a money thing? Is this a management thing? Should we be, and my last guest talked about this, where maybe when you find that it's taking too long to get it, you put the guys into the private sector where they can have appointments with physicians over here where we can expedite some of the process. There's some acute needs that should go through the VA, but some of the other stuff, they shouldn't have to wait 6 months to get an appointment.
Part of it's a money thing. There is more money in the system, but there are also more veterans now than we had in recent generations, thanks to our military action.
And a whole scope of different veterans, right, from Korea to now these new vets.
The spending per veteran is not up. The spending per veteran is not keeping up with the numbers that need to be there. Part of it's just the established bureaucracy. We've had other guests this week who have said, look, this is just how the VA functions, and it has always been slow to change and to deal with the new changes, the influx of new veterans, and also the new risks that they face. And part of it's just the inherent problems that you're going to have with any bureaucracy going forward. There are a whole host of problems. Eric Shinseki was not the cause of this.
No.
I mean, I don't think anybody's going to disagree too strenuously that with his firing or with his resignation. It's a shame that a guy who was decorated and a good soldier goes out on a note like this.
And by the way, a soldier who needed the VA after being not only decorated as Anderson, but also injured in battle for us. But Dom, this is what I don't get about this particular one, and we've seen this before with other veteran issues where they don't want to come forward because of PTSD or whatever else. Sometimes some of the folks that are holding back the necessary change the most are the ones who need the most help. Veteran groups should be screaming louder about this. And I remember doing a story, I think it was Montrose and Castle Point, and then down in East Orange in the Valley, and East Orange and Lyons down in Jersey, where I'm like, you guys, you fought for this country. Some of them, we'll be talking about this next week, on Omaha and Utah Beach in D-Day, and they're fighting to get care. I'm like, use the media. I mean, politicians love to wrap their arms around the veterans, right? Some of them might be two-faced and phony when it comes to writing the checks for them. But my point is, not enough people scream about this that know the problems about it because they're trying to be good soldiers. And I think that's part of the reason we are where we are right now. The good soldier aspect isn't working.
That's part of the problem, but Richard, you very well know the politics of this. Some of these groups don't complain because of fear of retribution by the VA. The fact of the matter is he became a distraction for Democrats going into the election, so he had to go. But how about hiring more doctors? How about that? How about hiring more support staff? Not necessarily more money, okay, that will cost more money, but how about bringing more personnel in? And instead of fudging the books and faking the numbers, starting out of Arizona, Senator McCain's backyard, if we're gonna go partisan on this, why not? And if we're gonna go partisan, this, as you pointed out, this happened under Republican administrations as well. It's a mass bureaucracy, and the best answer that I heard came from Andrew last night on this topic in terms of make the funding mandatory.
And what Andrew said is really attach it, right, to the cost of soldiers.
Yeah, as soon as you assign soldiers to go overseas, something like Iraq or Afghanistan, you have to include funding for the Veterans Administration for what happens for their care and their treatment when they come home.
The other thing I would say is the way the VA operates, it mostly operates under civilian operation. If it operated under military, if everybody over there was in the military, you would have tighter controls and better management. But it's not like that. It's civilian based, and so a lot of things slip through the cracks. There isn't that tight management system. There isn't the type of penalty if you don't do your job as if you would face in the military. So if they militarize the Veterans Administration, I think that would help too.
Interesting. You know, we don't have time for it, but there was another resignation that kind of goes under the radar. Jay Carney, the press secretary. Now you'd think one's not connected to the other, and there's no indication that there is, but that's a tough gig, man. Yeah. Being a press secretary, I think after you go through that and you go through some of the firing lines, the questions every day on everything under the sun, you can do just about anything. But you've known a few press secs in your career. They say one of the happiest days is when they say goodbye, right?
Oh, I would definitely agree with that. I mean, that's a tough spot to be in.
Think about this for a second. You can't blow your cool, or you shouldn't blow your cool, because it hurts your president. There are certain things the president and his administration cannot say in front of you, because you have to have the right of deniability when you go before the media, because the worst thing a press secretary can do is lie to the media, because then we'll never believe another word that comes out of his and her mouth. It's one of the toughest jobs that you can imagine. And I remember, and they work long, long hours.
So remember during the Lewinsky affair, that poor press sec for Clinton? And he would just, McCurry, and he would just every day have to go out there, and it would just be like, all right, let the beatings begin, you know, and then he couldn't go anywhere with it, and then you could see it coming out where he himself was like, I'm with you on this one, how frustrated he was by it. And sometimes you'll see the humanity coming through these guys, but a lot of times they got to sit there and just basically say as artfully as possible, I don't know, you know, and after a while it must drive you nuts.
Yeah.
Probably the second toughest job in Washington, I would think.
Yeah. It's a smart move to get out while the administration still has 2 years and you know, fit yourself into the private sector, not get out at the last moment, because you're still very controversial. There might be more scandals to come that you're defending.
He's trying. He's
I'm
trying
telling
so
you.
hard. Yeah. Can't help himself.
Shouldn't have mismanaged his transition.
Exactly.
Before Richard keeps going here, go to Facebook and Twitter. Sound off with a question tonight. Will Shinseki's resignation really help to get to the bottom of the VA hospital scandal, or will it really be more of the same? Coming up next, we're going to be talking newsbreakers here, from the VA scandal to the Westchester housing discrimination suit. Andrew sat down earlier in the last couple of days with both Senator Chuck Schumer and the man who wants Andrew Cuomo's job, Westchester County Exec Rob Astorino, to talk about some of the biggest stories. He's going to be focusing on them in a new program airing this week, and we'll get a preview straight ahead.